Welcome to USA Rift. If you really want to understand the invisible forces shaping your money, your life, and your future, you need to subscribe to the channel right now. Go ahead and hit that like button, leave a comment down below with your thoughts as we go, and if you want to support the absolute truth and go even deeper with us, consider becoming a channel member today. Because today, in this explainer, we are not talking about simple budgeting. We're not talking about clipping coupons or skipping lattes. We're going to slowly, meticulously expose the hidden mechanics of a brand new financial machine, one that the government is building right under our noses. A machine that absolutely promises to save the working class, but is built on a foundation of rules so incredibly specific, so unbelievably complex, that it might just trap them instead. Let's dive in.
You are not broke because you buy coffee. You are not broke because you simply spend too much. The uncomfortable truth, the reality presented in the raw data, is that the financial system in the United States often operates as a massive, intricate labyrinth. And it's a labyrinth built specifically and almost exclusively for the wealthy to navigate. And right now, analysts are tracking a massive shift. We're talking about a structural change involving the highest levels of the executive branch and a multi-billion-dollar wealth transfer. Yet, almost nobody sees the microscopic details of how it actually works. We are going to break those details down for you today.
I want you to look at this number on the screen. 57 million. Speak it out loud and just let it sink in for a second. 57 million. Exactly 57 million Americans are currently deliberately locked out of workplace wealth building. Now, this isn't just some random abstract statistic. This encompasses your 1099 independent contractors. It's the gig economy workers driving for apps late into the night. It's the employees of millions of micro-businesses across the country who have been entirely excluded from the compounding interest engine that actually builds the American middle class. They do not have a 401k. They do not have an employer match. They are on their own.
And this reality points to something much darker, a massive structural deficit in our economy.
You see, this hidden retirement crisis isn't just an accident. Critics argued it's a feature of the system, and it's setting the stage for the government's latest, totally unprecedented intervention. We're talking about a sweeping executive order attempting to fix literally decades of financial exclusion. But to understand the fix, you have to understand the depth of the crisis first. The old system trapped lower-income workers in an absolute cycle of pure survival. For years, the government offered this thing called the Savers Credit to help them out. Sounds great, right? But researchers point out the brutal catch. It was a non-refundable tax credit. That meant it only helped you if you already owed a significant amount of federal income tax. But listen, if you are a low-income worker just trying to survive, the standard deduction likely wipes out your tax bill entirely, bringing your liability to exactly zero. And so, the government gave you exactly zero. You had to already be comfortably sitting in the tax-paying middle class just to access the benefits designed to help you get there in the first place. It's a paradox.
That brings us to the April 2026 executive order. I want you to listen carefully to the exact wording here. These oft-forgotten workers should be given access to retirement plans similar to those offered to federal employees. This right here is the narrative. It's an attempt to bridge a massive, dangerous wealth gap by creating an entirely new marketplace. Essentially, the goal is to replicate the highly efficient thrift savings plan, the TSP, that federal workers enjoy, but aggressively force it out into the private sector for everyone else. But the government isn't just launching a simple website. They are introducing a highly complex machinery of wealth transfer. This new mechanism is authorized deep within the legislative text of the Secure 2.0 Act of 2022, and it's absolutely crucial we understand the difference here. We are moving away from the passive, broken old system, that useless savers credit which just offset tax liability on paper, to the active, aggressive framework of the new savers match. Starting in 2027, the United States Treasury is legally authorized to make a direct 50% cash injection. Let me repeat that. They will literally deposit federal money directly into your personal retirement account, up to $1,000 of totally free capital. In a dark, almost ironic twist, the federal government is essentially acting as a venture capitalist, offering seed money for your very survival. But, and this is a massive but, only if you meet their exact microscopic terms. To deliver this cash injection, they are launching TrumpIRA.gov on January 1, 2027. It's an online marketplace, sure, but the rules governing the financial products allowed on this site are intensely strict. Let's really dissect this 0.15% fee cap. The government is strictly mandating that financial institutions on this portal can charge no more than 0.15% in net expense ratios, with absolutely zero minimum balance requirements. I want you to think about what that actually means mathematically. If a struggling worker opens an account and manages to save exactly $1,000, 0.15% means the massive financial institution holding the money earns exactly $1.50 for the entire calendar year. $1.50 to maintain that account, generate tax statements, and provide customer service. The data suggests the government is essentially forcing private financial megacorporations to operate at near zero profit margins to service the working class. The tension here between Wall Street's desire for profit and the government's strict mandate is immense, and it's a huge wildcard in how this will actually play out.
Now, pay very close attention to this operational timeline. You don't just sign up on a website and instantly get a check in the mail. No, you must front your own hard-earned cash in 2027. Then, you have to survive. You have to make it through a full 12-month calendar year, navigating brutal inflation, skyrocketing rent, and life's endless barrage of emergencies, all without touching that money. Then, in early 2028, you must successfully and accurately file your federal tax return to formally claim the match. Only after all of that does the Treasury finally deposit its funds. The system requires immense patience and financial endurance from the very people who often have the absolute least of both.
Now, let's shift our focus to the boundaries of this program, because this is exactly where analysts point out the system begins to build its walls.
Look at the exact mathematics of eligibility here. The precision is terrifying. If you are a single filer, you only get the full 50% match if your modified adjusted gross income is between $0 and $20,500. The very moment you earn $20,501, the match begins to slowly die. It is a straight line reduction. If you earn $28,000 a year, which is the midpoint of the phase-out range, your match is slashed right in half, dropping from 50% down to 25%. And the second you cross $35,501, the match completely terminates. You get absolutely nothing. This creates a deeply flawed scenario where picking up overtime or taking extra shifts at work to feed your family actively destroys the federal benefit you are entitled to. It is perfectly calibrating exactly who receives this wealth transfer and who is left out in the cold.
Think about the dark reality of this mathematical paradox for just a second. To get the maximum $1,000 match, you have to contribute $2,000 of your own money, but to actually qualify, you must earn under $20,500 for the entire year. The exact people who qualify for this massive life-changing benefit are the exact people who will struggle the absolute most to find $2,000 in disposable cash. Saving roughly 10% of your gross income when you are living right at or below the poverty line while navigating the rising costs of housing and food? That is a monumental, almost impossible psychological and physical hurdle.
So the crucial point boils down to this single number, 50. A 50% guaranteed return on investment. Outside of elite, high-paying corporate 401k matching programs, you will almost never find an asset class anywhere on Earth that legally guarantees a 50% instant return. It is incredibly, undeniably powerful. But it is entirely locked behind an impossibly aggressive income barrier.
And what happens if you finally manage to scale that barrier? What happens if you actually get the money, but then life happens? Welcome to the hidden mechanisms of control. The system has a very specific terminology for this, the specified early distribution. In plain English, this means pulling your money out before you reach the golden age of 59.5. If you are forced to do this, it immediately triggers the 10% early withdrawal tax under IRS Section 72T. You see, this match isn't just free money, it's a conditional gift. The system will give you the $1,000, sure, but if you suffer a severe medical emergency, if your car breaks down and you can't get to work, if you are forced to touch your own capital just to survive, the rules dictate a severe penalty.
I want you to listen to the heavy gravity of the actual legislative text under 26 U.S. Code Section 6433. Quote, "The tax imposed by Chapter 1 shall be increased by an amount equal to such excess, the Saver's Match Recovery Tax." They don't just hit you with an early withdrawal penalty. No. The Treasury will literally claw back the matching funds dollar for dollar. If you break the strict rules of the system to save yourself from a real-life crisis, the government legally seizes its money right back.
Let's map out this terrifying timeline so you can really see the trap. It's December. You have a massive financial emergency, and you're forced to withdraw $1,500. Instantly, you owe a 10% penalty, so that's $150, plus ordinary income taxes on the withdrawal. Simultaneously, the recovery tax clawback is triggered against your federal match. The only escape hatch you have is what's called the recontribution window. You must somehow find $1,500 of new money to put back into the account before the exact tax filing deadline, April 15th of the following year. Furthermore,
You will have to file specific, physical IRS forms to prove to the government you completed the repayment. Think about how insane that is. If you couldn't afford the emergency in December, how on earth will you afford to pay back the government by April 15th? Critics argue this isn't a benefit. It is a bureaucratic nightmare deliberately designed to punish the illiquidity of the working class.
Let's zoom out from these microscopic details to the massive, systemic scale.
We need to transition into the deep, underlying psychological traps of human financial behavior. Because creating a portal and a match is really only half the battle. When people have access to an employer plan, like a standard 401k, participation is massive. Roughly 80% of workers invest. Why? Because the corporate system does all the psychological heavy lifting for you. Through auto-enrollment and seamless payroll deductions, the decision is made entirely invisible. It requires zero friction, zero effort. It just happens.
Now, look at the stark contrast on this slide. The data shows that when working people do not have that workplace access and are left entirely to their own initiative, only 5 to 15% of people will actually go out and open an IRA. That is a devastating behavioral gap. We are essentially expecting the most exhausted, overworked demographic in America to navigate complex tax rules, track down a government portal, compare expense ratios, and manually deposit funds they barely have.
Analysts emphasize we must completely dismantle the illusion that a simple website fixes systemic poverty. TrumpIRA.gov relies entirely on voluntary signups. Yes, the executive branch is trying to remove choice overload by curating low-fee options, but removing choice overload does not magically create disposable income out of thin air. Furthermore, true automatic enrollment, which is literally the only thing proven by behavioral economists to actually change human behavior at scale, requires a literal act of Congress to rewrite labor and tax laws. And on top of all that, financial providers might simply reject the 0.15% fee mandate. Why would a bank participate in a system that mathematically forces them to lose money on administrative cost? This portal might launch, but without the private sector playing ball and without auto-enrollment, it might remain fundamentally empty.
Which brings us to the final systemic illusion. Observers really must ask themselves, when the government creates a beautiful piece of machinery, but locks the controls behind impossible income paradoxes, deep psychological friction, and terrifying recovery taxes, who is really winning? The burden of financial survival remains squarely on the shoulders of the exhausted working class. Let this quote linger heavily in the air. If you really want to change behavior, you don't just give people access, you build systems that move them into action. The executive order provides a shiny new tool. The Secure 2.0 Act authorizes a theoretical $1,000. But critics argue that together they do absolutely nothing to dismantle the brutal friction of everyday poverty. They do not magically pay the rent so you can afford to save.
Access to a system does not equal participation in a system. You can stand outside the vault all day long, but if you don't have the key, the wealth inside isn't yours. And the absolute worst part is, most people will never realize this truth until it is way too late. If you want to keep pulling back the curtain on how these systems really operate, make sure you hit subscribe, like this explainer, and join as a USA Rift channel member to support what we do. Until next time, stay vigilant and always watch where the money actually flows.